Chapter 5. 1942 came, but the British didn't, nor did the French. They were too busy fighting the Germans on the west side. The radio talked about fighting in Denmark and Norway and Belgium and the Netherlands, but since it was a German station, they always said that they were winning. Uncle Mushi said we couldn't trust anything that we heard on the radio, but he listened to every word anyway, just like the rest of us. All I care about is getting out of our crowded house for some freedom and some fresh air, but my parents were still worried that I'd be snatched up by the Nazis. The snow was still thick on the ground, and with more falling every day, the Jews were put to work shoveling off the streets. The Nazis also took the Jews away to work in Krakow's factories. Some of the truckloads of Jews never came back, but somebody knew what happened to them. My parents didn't want to take any chances, one way or the other, so I had to stay in our building at all times. I took my ball into the hallway outside of our apartment and I practiced kicking it against the wall until a mean old Mrs. Imberglick across the hallway came out and yelled at me to stop. I was just about to go downstairs to the basement to play when I heard a scream from one of the lower floors. Then footsteps, lots of footsteps, a door smashing, and then more screams. I ran back inside of our flat. "Mama! Mama!" I called to my mom. "Something is happening in our building." Everyone staying in the apartment came together in the sitting room. We listened as screams and crashes grew closer. I felt sick. I wished my father was here with us, but he had gone out to stand in line for our vegetable rations. Thump, thump, thump. Somebody pounded on our door as we all jumped. "Open up! Open up! On authority of the Juderant!" Everybody looked at my mother. It was our house, after all, but she just watched the door with big round eyes. My heart was racing. What should we do? What could we do? "Mama," I said. "Thump, thump, thump! Open the door or we break your door down," another voice said, this time in German. It was a Nazi. "Mama," I said, "if we don't open it up, they will shoot us." My mother just stared at the door. None of the other parents made a move. I had to do something. I hurried over to the door and unlocked it, and a German officer and a Juderant police officer pushed past me down the hallway. The Juderant were the Jews that the Nazis put in charge of the ghetto, and they had special police officers who had to take orders from the Nazis. "When we tell you to open the door," the German officers told the adults, and the families huddled together, hugging one another tight. "Do you have any jewels? Gold? A radio?" he demanded. My mother didn't answer. She just stared at the Nazi and trembled. He was getting madder. I could tell. The officer took a step towards my mother and I spoke up. "In the kitchen," I said. The German turned to look at me with cold blue eyes. Then he nodded to the Jewish policeman who carried a sack. "All of your valuables," the officer said. "Now, or you will all get taken away." Somebody screamed across the hall. Old Miss Limerick and her family were being dragged away by German soldiers. Her son, a man my father's age, had blood running down from his forehead. "Give it to them!" "Hey, you guys, you should give them everything that you have. They will not hurt you then." The other families in our flat scrambled to give the Nazi officer everything that they had squirreled away. Little bits of jewelry, a pocket watch, a handful of zloty, and a member of the Juderant came out of our kitchen with a sack stuffed with more than just our radio. He went into the bedrooms, looking for anything of value. The German officer pulled a necklace right from my mother's neck, twisted her wedding ring right off of her finger. She flinched whenever he did it, but she didn't say a word. "This flat can stay," the German officer said, pocketing my mother's jewelry. "But next time, open the door quickly, or we will send you to the east with the rest." "Yes, sir, we will, sir," I said. The two men left. We all just stood frozen, listening to the shouts and the sobs above us and below us. Out on the streets, two big gray military trucks pulled up. Jews from our apartment building and other buildings around us were herded into these jeeps by German soldiers. They carried nothing with them. No suitcases, no extra clothes, no food or personal belongings. Wherever they were going, they would have to do without. Something clattered in the hallway outside. The doors to our flat and the Limerick's apartment were still wide open. I could see an overturned table and a lamp in their flat, but nothing more. Why had the Limericks and other families with them been taken away, and we hadn't? The officer said it was because we gave them our valuables. But the Limericks had a radio and jewelry and zolote just like us. The Germans had taken the Limericks for no other reason other than that they felt like it. A shot rang out on the street, and we all jumped in our seats. Yannick, Mr. Rosenblum whispered, the door. So I glanced at my mother with her million miles away. Look. Her eyes were focused on the rug at our feet, her face empty of emotion, and I don't know if she even heard the shot. I tiptoed down to the entrance of the hall and closed the door, flipping the lock with a click, and it didn't make me feel any safer. When the trucks in our streets were full, they pulled away. We never heard where they went. My father could have been on one. I didn't know. My mom just sat at the table, her mind still elsewhere, and at this time of the day she'd usually be in the kitchen preparing whatever rations we had for lunch. But it was of no use now. Our cupboards were cleared from the raid. We had nothing to eat. The other families retreated to their rooms to see what had been taken and what was left. The Rosenblum girls wailed like they were trying to outdo each other with volume, so I slipped into the hallway. The door of the Emmerglick's flat was still wide open. Someone was inside. It was Mr. Tatakaw from down the hall. When he heard the click of the door behind me, he whirled around. One of the Emmerglick's nice cushioned sitting room chairs was in his hands. He opened his mouth to say something, but he got all flustered and hurried out the door past me. But he took the chair with him. I walked the hallway of my floor, looking at all the empty rooms. 4 flats, 16 families, all gone. Only 2 had their doors shut, us and the Tatakaws. 5 flats were empty on the floor above us, but only 3 on the top floor. Maybe the Germans got tired from walking up those steps. I went back to the stairs and realized for the first time that there was another set of stairs going up, even though this was the top floor. And I'd never had any friends on the top floor, so I had never gone up there. Only but once or twice in the past to just run an errand. And I stared up at the stairwell, listening for a new invasion of Germans. But everything was quiet and still, so I climbed that extra flight of stairs. There was a big steel door at the top. I opened it a crack and looked outside. It's the roof. This door led out to the roof. How had I not known this was here before? But then, even if I had known, my parents would never let me come up here. Not in the past. What things like bedtimes and homework and safe places to play, they were more important than going out on the roof. None of that mattered now. So I pushed my way outside and stood on the roof of our building. It was flat and covered with gravel. Pipes and conduits stuck out from the roof here and there. The edges of the roof were a little more than a half a meter all the way around. They were plastered with black tar. Strangest of all was a small wooden shack built up against the big brick chimney, and it had a thin wooden door, and I went inside. I found heaps of garbage and feather from bird droppings. Pigeon coop, I thought. Mr. Emmerglick, he had a pigeon coop, probably. When I was a little boy, all I knew about the old man that lived across the hall is that he loved pigeons. But I'd never imagined he kept a coop up on the roof like this. The pigeons were all gone now, just like Mr. Emmerglick. He died a year before the Nazis came. But this shack on the roof, if, if it was repaired just a little bit, cleaned up, maybe some electricity running to it, and power lines came in from the building of the roof, my mind was racing. I ran back downstairs as fast as I could, and I burst into my flat. Mama! I cried. I found my mother in the kitchen hugging my father. He was alive. Thank goodness. He broke away from her whenever I came running in worried. What is it, Yannick? He said. Are they coming back? No, no. I want to show you something that I found. Come quick. My parents followed me up the stairs, walking when I wanted them to run, and finally I pulled them out onto the roof and showed them the pigeon coop. Don't you see? With a little work, we could live in here, I said. Leave our flat? My father said. Yeah, just the three of us, I told him. It's so crowded downstairs. Here we can have space all to ourselves. We can scrub the floor and the walls and clean it up. I can wire up a light for my projector, and a hot plate for cooking. There's no bathroom, but we could always go back downstairs for that. And in the winter, we'll have a chimney to keep us warm. I don't know, Yannick, my father said. My mother hadn't come inside the coop. Instead, she just stood outside staring back at the big steel door that had opened onto the roof. We can bring up chairs, I told my father, and a mattress, and bars, my mom said. It was the first thing that I'd heard her say since the Nazis broke into the flat. Can you put bars on the door? She stared at it, but I could tell her thoughts were still downstairs, reliving the invasion of our home. My father came to the coop with his arms around my mother's shoulders. Yes, Mina, we'll fix it up, the coop. We can live in here. We'll put bars on the door. Yannick and I will see to it. We gave our flat to the Rosenblums. The Brotmans were already moving into the Emmerglich's apartment across the hall. All empty flats in our building would soon be overflowing with families as more Jews were marched in through the gates. But for a short time at least, we could all live like normal people again, although we were in a chicken coop. While my father and I worked to clean this coop, my mom and I sat on the roof and sewed hidden pockets into the linings of our coats. Inside them we hid all the money and valuables that we had left. She never said another word, though, all day long. Father and I found 4 heavy steel bars in the basement. By sundown, we lifted our last one of them up to the door on the roof. They slid into place so that we could take them off and go out. But nobody from the inside of the stairs could push through. There, I told my mom, no one will ever break into this house ever again.